Hi and welcome. In this tutorial we're going to look at the idea of plagiarism, particularly as it applies to report writing. So I guess specifically the purpose or focus is to be able to differentiate between content that is plagiarized and content that is not, so that when you write something whether there is likely to be an issue or not. How to reference, to know how to reference content, so I'm going to provide some sources for that. And ultimately the objective is that you can combine the two of those things, i.e. use content and correctly reference it so that your report does not fall foul of the plagiarism label, and that there are going to be no issues with your report. So in terms of doing this, we're going to assume a context, so for example that you're writing your final year project report, and for the purpose of this we'll give a specific case that we're going to look at renewable energy or something like that. We're going to assume that you've downloaded the template for the report, which should be on your the project folder in Blackboard, that you've done the starting, that you've filled out the title and all that stuff, and that you're preparing to write the introduction, and with that in mind you've gone to Google to provide some inspiration. So on your report template, you have your title. You can click on that and change it. You put in your own name and your ID number, your supervisor and assessor, and note that there's a declaration here which says that I declare the submission as my own work in writing. So I'm going to come back to this in a minute. Any text or other material that's copied has been clearly acknowledged and referenced. This is about the plagiarism, that you understand what plagiarism means, and ideally this, and obviously this tutorial is going to help you clarify that. And there's a source or some sources on the library to help you with that. And the thing is going to be obviously checked by either the safe sign or Turnitin on Blackboard. You have a table of contents which you'd normally update at the end, a list of figures which you'd normally update at the end, and likewise a list of tables. An abstract is usually the last thing that you'd write. You may have acknowledgements there, and we're here, as I said, at my introduction, and I want to start writing my introduction. So I go to Google, for example, and maybe find some useful sources on, that disappeared, on renewable energy. So we'll go with this renewable energy and overview, and here we go, the importance of renewable energy and types of energy. So it's from the renewable energy world, and I come down here and I start looking at some of this, and I see, for example, it's got a section here that most renewable energy comes directly or indirectly from the sun, and it talks about how obviously you've got sunlight which comes directly from the sun. The sun's heat is used to drive the winds. That's kind of an interesting idea. The sun is used to create organic matter which forms bioenergy. You kind of go, actually that's a nice introduction, let's take that, and I'm going to base the start of my own introduction on this. So I'm going to go copy and over into my Word document and delete that, and go up to paste, and I'm going to paste special, and I'm going to paste it as unformatted text. Okay. Now, if I leave it like this, this is obviously very obviously plagiarized. I've copied it directly from another source, and more importantly, I'm not indicating that this is not my own work. So because I'm not indicating that it's not my own work, if I switch roles and say that now I'm an assessor, when I read this, I'm assuming that this is a student's work, and except that, of course, when I run it through Turnitin or when I look at the Turnitin report, it's going to highlight that all of this, has come from a single source, and that single source is the website. And therefore you're going to get into trouble for that, and we'll talk about the possible consequences later on. So one of the ways we might get around this is by identifying that this has come from a source. And one of the ways we do that is we put quotes around it. So by putting quotes around it, and then I put in a reference. So if I use the IEEE format, I use numbers. And then at the end, I'm going to have a section, which is my references. And I'm going to put in a link. I'm going to put in a reference to the website, and I'll talk about how we actually reference later on, but there's a reference to the website where that comes from. And sorry, so this should be then labeled number 1 if we use the IEEE format. Unfortunately, this is not really acceptable either, because the idea of using direct quotes like this, so quoting material directly, is that the material the idea is in some way controversial or needs to be emphasized. There's nothing in this text which is controversial, and there is no reason why we would need to quote such a large chunk of text. So if we're using direct quotes, we would usually be, quoting a sentence or two, which might be, the first sentence here, that most energy comes directly or indirectly from the sun, and we'd then include our reference for that, and that would be acceptable. But to directly quote a big, huge, a couple of paragraphs of text like is in here is not acceptable. So even though the thing might be correctly referenced, the process is not, or the technique is not right. This is not acceptable writing. This is not acceptable technical writing. So Turnitin obviously will highlight that this is plagiarized, and in this case it is actually right. There is no need to directly quote large chunks of text like this, and therefore this is an issue. And again, no more than the first instance, this will come up as a problem. So your third option then is we have our text and paste it in, and we decide that we're going to edit this a lot. So we can say maybe we'll start editing this a bit. So a lot of renewable energy comes, I might get rid of this word, directly or indirectly from the sun. And we might say something like, for example, sunlight electricity can be used directly for heating and lighting homes, for heating or lighting buildings, and you get the general idea. So we're going to make some changes to the text. And you might think, well, I've taken it, I've copied it from a source, I've rewritten some of it, or I've edited some of it, and now it's fine. Unfortunately, it's not. So even if I went and did this for the rest of it, this is still plagiarized, and it's still plagiarized because first of all, I haven't rewritten it. I've just changed a couple of words, and changing a couple of words is not rewriting something. And secondly, even if I do rewrite it, the idea that is here, this idea that the sun is the main source of renewable energy, is an idea which has come from one source, that source being this website, and that needs to be referenced. So even if you rewrite it, the fact that the idea has come from a single source means that that idea is not your own, and therefore the source in which you got it, in this case renewableenergyworld.com, needs to be referenced. But more importantly, you need to rewrite it in your own words, so that when you rewrite it in your own words, the structure of all this is different. So you don't have the same sentences in the same order, you don't have the same paragraphs in the same order, and the text here is substantially different. And the only way, unfortunately, that you can do that is, you go to your website, you read the text here, you then come out of that, and instead of what I did, copy and paste, you delete all that, and you delete all this, and you start writing, from scratch, and you try and rephrase or state the main ideas from that source in your own words, and if you do that, then they're going to be in a slightly different order. They are going to be in a different sequence to which from what they are on that website. But again, if they're coming from a single source, then you quote that source. Now, if they're coming from multiple sources, so if you've done lots of reading, you've got different books, you've got different websites, you've got different sources, then that's not necessary, because it's not from a single source. It's not from it's not one main idea. You're taking lots of different sources and lots of different ideas and combining them, and therefore the concepts are new, they're different, the sequence is new and different and all that, and that doesn't then need to be referenced. But if it's coming from a single source, then technically it should be. And the same thing applies if we go and take some data, for example. So if I was interested in European percentage of varying renewable energy, so if I wanted to get some data and was looking for some interesting or statistics on renewable energies in Europe, and I find this renewable energy statistics website, and I decide, no, sorry, I didn't want that one. I want well, actually, even here, look, here are all our European countries with their total renewable energies. This is as of 2014, broken down into the different categories. Let's say I think that's interesting. I want to take that table or use even parts of that. For example, maybe Ireland's contributions, which anyhow, it doesn't matter whether it's there or not. Want to take France's or something like that. Because I'm taking data from elsewhere, then I should and I need to reference this being the source of the data. So the idea is, if you're taking ideas, text, data, tables, graphs, programs, any of that stuff, it needs to be properly referenced. In terms of referencing it, you can go to, in terms of how you reference it, you can go to the library's website at CIT and go to the supports for you. It should be here. So we've got, for example, we've got online tutorials and guides, first of all. So they have a referencing guide there. And there are different formats. So there's things called APA, IEEE, which is the Institute for Electrical and Electronic Engineers. Harvard is a very popular guide. Let's say, because we're engineering, let's say we're going to use the IEEE format. It doesn't really matter which format, as long as you're consistent. So in the IEEE style, in the text, what's called the citation, we use numbers, so they go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 all the way down. And at the end, in the referencing section, they're again numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 all the way down. And the guide then provides the structure, if you like, for some of the more common things that you're going to find. So how do you cite a book? If it's an electronic book, a journal article, a web page. So in our case, we talked about 2 web pages. So the format would be, we'd have the name of the author or the body in this. So the example here is the Health and Safety Authority. The title of the web page, which might be the same as the author. So if I go back to the first one that we were looking at, the source would be Renewable Energy World. The title of the web page would be Types of Renewable Energy. So titles the fact that it's an internet source. You include the URL, and you include the date if it's evident from the website when it was last updated. So sometimes on the bottom of a website they'll have some detail on when the thing was last updated. So you'd have to scroll down to here. So this is 2016, so I guess we can assume that it's 2016. There isn't anything else explicit on it about when it was last updated, unless it's further up here. I don't think so. No, so we go 2016, and then the last bit of it is the date that you accessed it. So in this case, the 12th of December 2016, right? So that's how you'd format, and you know, different sources have slightly different formats. So you know, if you've got a journal, you look at the format for a journal. If you've got a book, you look at the format for the book. If they're not in it, go to IEEE website. They have a full referencing system there, and you'll find other examples, but those are the dominant ones that you're going to be using. So, as I said, the report needs to be written in your own words. Direct quotes, material directly taken from another source, identified by double quotes. We talked about that. They're usually short. They're infrequent, and mostly used when the content is controversial, or when you want to emphasize something. We talked about tables, data, graphs, programs, circuits. Ideas that are not your own must be referenced. And if you're unsure of what or how to reference, then talk to your project supervisor. So to summarize, all text and what we mentioned must be referenced. If you don't do this, so if you don't either reference it properly, if you take large chunks of text that are inappropriate, even if you put in the double quotes, that's a problem, because it's really poor technical writing. It's not acceptable. There are various different styles of referencing. It doesn't really matter which you choose. The two most popular ones in CIT would be the Harvard style and the IEEE style. So either of them you can choose. There's no requirement to adhere to one of them. The implications for plagiarism vary. So there is a formal document which talks about the academic policy. I'll just go to the start of this. The academic policy governing, or the policy governing academic honesty, plagiarism, and infringements relating to exams and assessments. If you go onto mycit.ie and do a search for that, you'll find it. So they define plagiarism within this. It is not permitted to submit others' work or ideas without appropriate acknowledgement. And later on they talk about the possible penalties. So a mark of 0 recorded for an assessment item, failure of a module, failure of the module, failure of the stage, restriction of your final award classification, temporary or permanent suspension of studies. Right, so depending on the severity of the plagiarism and the degree to which it's believed that it was intentional, and obviously the impact of it. So like if it's a small assessment item compared to the small with a large assessment item, then the penalty may vary from actually what's not on that, a warning for very minor cases, to, as I mentioned, temporary or permanent suspension of studies. So there are implications for this. It's the same as copying in an exam, and you do need to be aware of that. The declaration that you sign at the start of your report clearly states that you understand the concept of plagiarism and agree to submit a report that represents your own work and writing. So there are, I guess, obligations on you to make sure that you do understand this, that you make some, if you're not clear about it, that you make some effort, talk to your supervisor, look at some of the resources on the library website, and make sure that you make an effort to rewrite things that you find interesting in your own words, and that that the report that you submit represents your own work in your own writing, and therefore it represents your own understanding. As I said, I hope this is of some use to you and helps you in your writing.